a Queens by the Minute exclusive.
With that, Commissioner, I thank you for accepting my invitation. I was a little surprised at the acceptance, and I am grateful for it. And we look forward to hearing from you, Commissioner Steve. Thanks.
Thank you very much, President Katz. So if you ask me to do something, I'm more than willing to do it. I welcome this opportunity to speak to all of you. This setting the room is a little bit awkward, so I apologize to those of you that are seeing what's left of my hair and back. And for the front, we'll try to do the best we can. I wanted to take some time to have this conversation this evening, which I see as the beginning of a series of conversations with you as we continue to make some changes. First, I want to tell a little bit about myself. I want to tell you a little bit about what my role in the administration has been, what it is now, certain tangible things that are moving in the good direction, certain things that are challenges and problems, and try to share with you information about certain things in Queens. So first, some of you I have appreciated over the years. You were supportive of me when I was at the Legal Aid Society for 33 years. I think some of you know I ran the organization for my last 10 years there. It's an organization of 1,900 employees, 1,100 lawyers. Anyone knows lawyers, imagine managing 1,100 lawyers, and a $220 million budget. And I got a battlefield promotion to run it when it was about a half a second away from going bankrupt. So I know a lot about dealing with a situation that's in extremis and trying to turn it around. The mayor asked me to be the commissioner of HRA in 2014, which was an agency that I had sued for about 30 years and knew a lot about it and a lot about its problems. As the borough president said, it serves about 3 million New Yorkers, and we've been spending time over the last 2 years really reforming the agency. I've spoken to at the borough budget consultation process about a number of reforms. I'm a former member of a community board in Brooklyn where I live. So I understand the community board process, and I did want to go to originally when I was appointed to the various of your boards to talk about the reforms we're implementing at HRA. I was asked earlier this year by the mayor to conduct a 90-day review of homeless services in New York City. And that culminated in a recommendation in April, about 6 months ago, for the Department of Homeless Services and HRA to be integrated together under a single commissioner, the Commissioner of the Department of Social Services, which is me. In April, we articulated a series of 46 reforms to address problems that have built up over the 20-year lifetime of the Department of Homeless Services. And so we're 6 months into implementing a whole range of programmatic changes in addressing homelessness in New York City. I did not bring a fancy PowerPoint with me this evening. I brought a one-page chart, which I would like to pass out now. The old trial lawyer in me says, don't talk when people are looking at something that you have handed out. But I would like you to look at the chart before I speak. So I'm going to just take a moment.
Thank you.
Just take a look at the chart before you.
I think in the interest of time,
I'm going to go. I will go.
we do have a hard stop.
Understood. So homelessness.
Not because of you, because I asked you to have a hard stop.
No problem. I can talk fast too. Fast talking, recovering lawyer. So homelessness in New York City has increased 115% between 1994 and the present time frame. In January 1994, and I did mean that, 1994, there were less than 24,000 New Yorkers, men, women, children, in the shelter system. Just shy of 24,000 people. In January 2002, there were 31,000 men, women, and children in the shelter system. By January 2014, there were 51,000 men, women, children in the shelter system. If you look at the chart before you, it shows you, based upon the New York City Office of Management and Budget Analysis, what the trajectory was for homelessness in New York City. And it shows you that trajectory was heading towards 71,525 people in June of 2017. And had we taken no action, would right now be in excess of 67,000 New Yorkers. Today, we reached 60,000 New Yorkers. And we announced a couple of weeks ago we expected we would, particularly as the weather began to change, although today it's a warmer day. But this reflects part one of the mission that we've undertaken, which is to break the trajectory of the growth. But you can still see that we have yet to bend the curve in the last 6 months of the reforms that we've implemented. But the first step was clearly breaking the trajectory. As you can see, the most significant growth occurred when New York City had no rental assistance programs to help move New Yorkers out of shelter or to keep them from entering shelter. Between 2011 and 2014, the system was adding about 5,000 men, women, and children a year because the city had made a determination to have no rental assistance programs to address homelessness. And so that's the trajectory that we inherited. Now, although I was not in government during those years, I should apologize to all of you. I brought a case against the city to stop the elimination of rental assistance, and I lost it in the New York Court of Appeals by 4-3. If I had been a better lawyer that day, the trajectory that we look at may not be the trajectory that we have inherited. So I apologize for losing that case against the City of New York. I guess my reward is now to run the programs that are here. But the background of this 114% increase in homelessness in New York City is not about partisan politics at all. It's not about prior administrations, current administrations. It's about the reality of the housing market that we see, which is that 500,000 New Yorkers who are renters fall into arrears in any given year and face potential eviction. 3 out of 10 New Yorkers who are renters are paying more than 50% of their income in rent. That is the background of the situation that we confront and why we see New Yorkers seeking shelter from us on any given night. And we have a legal obligation based upon the New York State Constitution and a moral obligation to meet that need on any given night when families with children, families without children, or single women or single men come to us for help. And I use the term New Yorkers purposely. There's been a lot of discussion over the years about are we sheltering people from other places. We ran an analysis of the New Yorkers in our family shelter system, for example, in June at the close of the fiscal year, and we found that out of 13,000 families, only 130 or so, slightly less, but I'm rounding up, had no connection to New York City. So this is a New York problem. This is not a problem of people coming from other places. We could talk about all of the years that resulted in street homelessness from deinstitutionalization and people being released from mental health hospitals that are now in our single shelters because the promise of community-based mental health services never happened. But we own the situation, we have it, we have to address it. There have been some tangible successes, but much more work to be done, and those are the kinds of issues that I know led the borough president to ask me to come here. But let me review some of the tangible things that have happened that are positive things that cause this trajectory to be broken, but the curve, as I said, is not yet bent. So, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? For many years, the city didn't have effective and robust prevention programs in place. I remember lobbying then Councilmember Katz, then Councilmember Comrie, Councilmember Crowley, Councilmember Brenner, Councilmember Donovan about, sorry, I didn't see you, I apologize, about the need for legal services. And I have to say that in the current council and in the administration, there's a much greater understanding of the role legal services plays. So we've increased funding for legal services from $6.4 million to $62 million, a tenfold increase in legal services. We've increased the payment of rent arrears to prevent evictions. 53,000 households last year received rent arrears payments to prevent evictions. In the year before I was appointed HRA commissioner, that ran in part into my tenure, 42,000 households received rental assistance. And guess what? Something that all of you have been saying for many years at your community board meetings: if you give people lawyers in court and if you pay their rent arrears, you reduce evictions. So as a result of these two reforms, evictions by marshals are down 24%. That is a positive. That's one of the reasons why this trajectory has been broken. In terms of rental assistance, we rebuilt that rental assistance that was eliminated between 2011 and 2014, and 45,000 New Yorkers either didn't come into the system or were moved out because of rental assistance and other housing assistance. That's a part of breaking this trajectory that we inherited. Street homelessness is a problem that everybody sees. We are doing something that's never been tried before, which is, instead of looking at the gross numbers, we're looking at people as individuals and eliminating the one-size-fits-all approach. And instead, we're building a by-name list of people actually on the street. And as we'll be coming out with a report shortly, we've had literally hundreds of individuals since we implemented this in April that we've been able to bring off the streets. That doesn't mean that you might not walk across or walk in the street any day of the week and see someone who's homeless. It does show you the beginnings of the reforms that are being put in place. Many of you, I know, have read about conditions in shelters. When I was asked to conduct the 90-day review back in January, we wanted to improve conditions in shelters, so we inspected the heck out of every shelter we were going to stay in, and we found 10,500 violations in the 300 or so shelters we want to stay in. And as a result of a multi-agency effort, we've now reduced those violations to about 2,400. Doesn't mean any day there might not be more, because we continue to inspect, but I think it's an indication of how we're trying to approach conditions in shelters. Security is a major issue historically in shelters. I'm very happy to say the NYPD sent over a management team to manage the security system and the shelter system, and is training all of the Department of Homeless Services peace officers who are members of local 237 and Teamsters, and the partnership with the police department is very important to us. But clearly there's much more to do. Otherwise you wouldn't be asking me to come to this meeting. And we are clearly very focused on how much more there needs to be done, and the things that we've done are only the beginning of the kinds of things that the reforms we announced in April are intended to address. First, and very importantly, we're moving to a borough-based system of dealing with a citywide problem. What does that mean? That means that we have people in our shelter system that come from literally every community board in the city and every borough in the city, and we are very focused on making it possible for when people enter the shelter system that they can keep their kids as close as possible in the schools, that they can be closer to medical care, closer to jobs, and so forth. We can't make this change overnight. This system is one, when I represented individual clients, always bothered me. I'd have a client from the Bronx placed in Staten Island, a client from Staten Island placed in Queens, and a client in Queens placed in Brooklyn, and fill it in. But we are moving forward to repurpose the system to make it a much more community-based, borough-based system. That means a need for more shelters. We need to create a vacancy rate. We have virtually no vacancy rate on most nights, and that means you need to have the flexibility to not place someone that comes in at 11, 12 o'clock at night at whatever you have available, but you have some place to place them that's available proximate to their borough and or community. We've been able to open 9 new shelters during the course of the last number of months across the city, and I think that's important. Again, it's a citywide problem. We're attacking the clusters. What are the clusters? There's been much discussion about the clusters. These were apartments that for 16 years the city administration rented and turned into shelter units. So instead of opening a new shelter that was purpose-built during multiple administrations going back to the Giuliani administration, there were rentals of apartments that could have been used for permanent housing to be instead used for shelter. There are 12,000 men, women, and children in these units. There are 3,000 units. Most of them are in the Bronx. We have begun the process of engaging landlords to persuade them to give the people in place leases so that they can remain in place and not be displaced, not be in the homeless shelter system anymore, and implement a system of repairs. We announced that we will accomplish this by 2018, and we're well advanced in the process of negotiations with landlords to try to make this happen. Again, didn't happen overnight. It took 16 years to take 3,000 apartments that could have been used for permanent housing off the rental market, and it's not going to happen overnight. In the meantime, however, what does that mean? That means if we're not going to keep renting apartments and taking them off the rental market as had been done in the past, that means if a family with children comes in on any given night, we're going to need to find some place to put them. And that's where we get to the increased use of commercial hotels. New York City has been renting commercial hotel rooms since John Lindsay was the mayor. Then I think they used the Waldorf actually on one occasion, which certainly put the matter on the front page of the paper. So we have, as part of our reforms, we clearly said we're going to phase out the use of commercial hotels, but you cannot both get out of the clusters and phase out the use of commercial hotels at the same time. We prioritize phasing out the use of the clusters because that's real housing that was taken off the market that we want to put back in place. Again, representing homeless people, typically the city would open a shelter in the middle of the night. No notification, no nothing. The 9 shelters that we have been opened under a new communication process in which we give communities at least 30 days notice before we open a shelter. And the ways that we open new shelters, again, I'm distinguishing that from commercial hotels. The way we open new shelters involves not-for-profit shelter providers making a proposal to us through an open-ended RFP. And then we evaluate that proposal, and as part of the evaluation process, there is notification, and we give 30 days notice, at least. And we're actually, in most cases, giving more than 30 days notice. Part of the opening of the shelter then results in there being a community advisory board so that there can be an ongoing oversight process for operations. Commercial hotels are quite a different thing. And there the rental is usually in the middle of the night. You have a problem of, I get a call at 1, 2 in the morning, we've got 20 families, we can't find a place for them, what are we going to do? We have a hotel we can put people in. I don't think anyone in this room with that call would say, don't rent a hotel room, put them out on the street. So we have a legal and moral obligation to do that, so we have been doing that. But it's clear to me, and to all of us in the administration, that the fact that hotel rooms have been rented for many years without any notification process has to be changed. And so we will be, in the coming weeks, providing to electeds and others a notification process with respect to the use of commercial hotels. Historically, it was viewed as a fair share issue, and that if the usage was 50%, there would be a notification. As you'll see in a policy that we will be providing, we're going to be going beyond that. I totally understand if you're a community board chair or an elected official and one of your constituents calls you about something and you would be saying to us, why didn't I know first? We will be addressing that in this new policy that we will be moving forward with. I wanted to just sort of highlight the overall Queens facilities situation. So citywide, we've got about 60,000 men, women, and children in shelter. And we're in just shy of 30,000 units. And for a single adult, a unit is a bed. For a family with children or an adult family, a unit is a room. So think beds or rooms, depending on which population we're dealing with. So about 30,000 units, if you will, for 60,000 people. In Queens, we currently have just shy of 5,000 units, and we've got about, as the Borough President said, about 8,500 people in those units. We are using hotels across the borough. We're using hotels across the city. Overall, in the city, we've got we're renting hotels in Manhattan, the Upper West Side, in Soho, in the Lower East Side, Midtown, similar to what you experience here. Again, this is part of a bridge process as we make larger reforms to the 20-year-old system to begin to reposition it to be a more community-based, borough-based system. In the short run, certainly understand the challenges that communities have, that community boards have, and elected officials have. This is the system that we've got. It's the changes that we're making. I welcome the opportunity to come and talk to you. Various of you talked to me on the phone at various times, and I'm happy to keep that process going. We have excellent staff. You don't always need me, and we're happy to take questions now. But I don't see this as I came in, you heard me for a half hour, you're going to ask me questions for a half hour, and then that's the end of it.
Thank you.